We are doing a little slip bobber fishing this morning, and I'm just setting up on the edge of a weed line here. It's a little isolated patch of weeds, and we are using leeches right now. And just pitching these out to the edge of this weed bed here. And I think we may have a bite. Ah, yes. Yes, we do. Oh, we have 2 bites. We have 2 bites. Is this a legal fish? Ooh, he's close. Oh, let's see what this one is. Doubling up here. There he is. 2 walleyes at once, guys. I just caught one on the jig kind of moving down this weed line, and I figured I'd set up the slip bobbers. And sure enough, there appears to be a few fish here. So I'm gonna measure these 2. I think the one is gonna be legal. This one's probably a hair small, but this is how fun slip bobbering can be. And I'm gonna go over kind of my setup here, kind of how I rig everything for slip bobbers for walleyes, kind of go over what I look for as far as spots to fish. And at the end, I'm just gonna give you a bunch of rapid fire tips on slip bobbers, because there's a lot of little nuances that really can make your life a lot easier when it comes to fishing slip bobbers. So I'm gonna get these guys unhooked and I'll go over some of this stuff. Oh, there's another one. Just got them out. There we go. So those 2 were not quite keeper size fish. They were just a hair under. This one, I'm thinking is gonna be a keeper. This one's fighting a lot harder already. I think he's gonna be just big enough. Oh yeah. Oh, boat flip him. That looks like a keeper right there. Let's measure that one. Let's measure that one. Oh yeah. That looks like a nice eating walleye right there. 15, 16, somewhere in there. That's the perfect size if you want to keep a fish fry. And they are obviously stacked right here because I barely got them out again. I got another bite, so I'll grab the pliers. I got to keep an eye on this other one in case I get a hit on that while I'm measuring this guy. But let's see if we can put this one in the box. All right, guys, I just got him back out again. Another fish on. I can't even believe how fast these fish are hitting this. Like, it hits the water and it's another fish on. It's crazy. So once I land this fish here, I want to get into a location. We'll see if this guy's big enough to keep. Ooh, he's close. I think he's probably a hair on the small side. He might just be bumping 15. Another nice looking fish. Obviously a school of just barely eaters here, but there could be a bigger one mixed in with them. So we'll keep going here. We got 2 in the box. I don't think it'll take long to get my 3rd here. Caught that one jigging, and then we caught a keeper on the slip bobber plus a few shorties here. So get that out there again. See what happens with that. All right, guys, it already went down. I couldn't even get it in the rod holder. Fish on. Oh, this is nuts. This one does feel a little bigger. Crank this up. This one does feel a little bigger. Is he? No, he's about that same category. Let's say about 14. Another one. Bobber down again. This time I switched to a minnow, hoping for a little bit bigger fish. And I think that is exactly what we got. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is a nicer fish for sure. Nicer fish. He might be a netter. Not a giant, but just right. Just right for that 3rd eater. There we go. Sometimes you just got to go with a little bit bigger bait to weed out some of those smaller fish. But that is my 3 eaters. I caught the one on the jig and caught the one on the leech and caught the one on the minnow here. So, but man, once you get on them, it can happen really fast. All right, guys, well, now that I got my 3 keepers, I can concentrate on getting you the information that you need. That did not take long at all. Once we found the school, it is really hard for those walleyes to resist a live bait dangling there in front of their face, as you can see. So I'm gonna leave these out behind me here. I kind of moved off the main school so that I can actually communicate and not get interrupted every 5 minutes. We probably could have sat on that school and pounded on them for quite a while because there was a lot of fish tucked up in that weed bed. But I wanted to get to the information here for you guys. Let me know if those go down, will you? First thing we got to go over is location. So where do we use slip bobbers? Where are they the most effective when you're targeting walleyes? Slip bobbers are a very pinpoint tool when it comes to fishing for walleyes. They're not something we're going to use on a spot that we need to cover a lot of water. We need to know that there's fish around to actually see that bait, because if we're on a big vast expanse of area that those fish could be and we don't have any electronics that we've pinpointed them with, we could be waiting a long time for a bite. So we use slip bobbers to pinpoint either fish that we're seeing on electronics or a spot on the spot, or a very small isolated piece of structure or cover. So here's some examples of some of those spots that I'm talking about. Anywhere where you've got an isolated weed bed, say on a kind of sandy stretch of bank, an isolated hump where you've got weeds on top of a small hump out deeper, the end of a long point extension where you've got that spot on the tip where it might have a rock pile and a few weeds around it, a crib, any kind of fish crib made out of logs or brush, anywhere where you can kind of concentrate those fish down into about a 60, 70, 80 yard area where you know they're going to be. Pitch those slip bobbers out there and whammo, you can catch them just like that. Even move spots and I'm still getting fish. Oh, this is a nice one too. Yeah, real nice. I'm gonna net that one. I'm gonna net that one. There we go. Hey. Well, buddy, you're lucky because today I already happen to have my limit of 3 walleyes. So you get to go back, because that would have been definitely an eater fish right there. So I'm gonna unhook him, let him go, and then we'll get on to a little bit more of what I was talking about. All right, guys, quick tip for you when it comes to unhooking deep hooked fish. I can see the hook, it's down towards the gullet on this walleye. Instead of trying to go in and pull it out, I'm just gonna slide these pliers in through the gill, grab the shank of that hook, spin it, and boom, it pops right out. And that is a much safer way of unhooking that fish than actually trying to dig it out from the front and ripping things. So I'm gonna let this fish go and he should be just fine. All right, guys, back to location. So we covered kind of those pinpoint structures that you can fish for these walleyes using slip bobbers. Now the other thing we can do is actually fish for the fish themselves. So whether we're using side imaging or forward facing sonar, we can spot a pod of fish and we can pitch that slip bobber out to the fish, and we can actually watch them on forward facing sonar come up and hit it, or we can just kind of see them on side imaging, get that bobber over there roughly to where they are, and we can catch them that way as well. And that works really, really well, especially when fish are finicky and they're not wanting to hit jigs or plastics or any of the faster moving baits. We can literally hover a live bait right on top of those fish until one of them eats it. All right, guys, that pretty much covers location when it comes to slip bobber fishing. Now let's get into my actual rod and reel setup and my rigging when it comes to slip bobbering for walleyes, because it is a system. It all works together, and if you don't do this properly, you're gonna struggle catching walleyes on slip bobbers. Now, by coincidence, Tom Boley actually just uploaded a video on slip bobber fishing, which I watched, and he does things a little bit different than I do. And there's one point in particular that I actually disagree with Tom on, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, when it comes to my rig, we'll start with the actual rod, reel, and line first. I'm using a 7'6" St. Croix slip and rig rod. So this rod is actually designed for slip bobber fishing and rigging. And what you'll notice about this rod is it is a longer rod, so 7'6", but it also is a very soft rod. It's got a lot of bend to it when you set that hook, and it's not a super fast action like rod that you'd use for jigging. It doesn't have a ton of backbone for setting the hook on heavier jig hooks. And the reason that it is that way is, number one, we want to be able to cast live baits without casting them off the hook. If you cast a live bait on a really stiff rod, it's very easy to rip that bait off the hook when you make the cast. So that nice soft rod kind of absorbs the shock. Number two, we don't need to feel the bite on this rod. All we need to do is be able to land the fish. And the softer and more parabolic and squishy that rod is, the easier it is going to be to land that fish, because it's going to absorb those head shakes. There's a lot of rod loaded up when you hook a fish. And that's really what you want when it comes to a slip bobber rod. The extra length also helps you manage these longer leaders that we have with slip bobbers, and kind of helps you just manage fish around the boat as well. So I'll leave a link for all this stuff in the description below, of course. The reel I'm using on these rods is the PC Fun Carbon X2. Now this reel is absolutely perfect for this style of fishing. It's nice and light, it's really reliable, got a good drag, manages line well, and it's just been working perfect on my slip bobber rods this season. So this is a size 2000. I'll leave a link below for these for sure, as well as a little discount code for you guys so you can pick them up if you want to. But absolutely great reel for slip bobber fishing. Now when it comes to line, this is kind of where I disagree with Tom a little bit. So he was using fluorocarbon line on his spinning reels for slip bobber fishing. Fluorocarbon line sinks. So fluorocarbon is the last line that I would use on my spinning reels when it comes to slip bobber fishing, because if you leave those bobbers out for very long, that fluorocarbon is going to sink down in the water and create a big U that now you're going to have to reel up through the water column to get to your bobber, and it's going to drag your bobber down. Not a good situation. That is not what we want. So I recommend either monofilament, which floats, or braid, which also floats. Now I'm a big braid fan, as you guys know, so I'm typically using braid, and I like 15-pound braid on my slip bobber rods. We don't have to worry about line resistance. Castability is not a problem because we've got the help of that bobber and the extra weight on there. I like to have enough poundage that if I hook a big fish, I'm going to be able to land it. So I'm going with 15. 15 is also easier to manage, doesn't get tangled as easily, and it's also easier to see. Now when it comes to visibility, I always use high vis lines on my slip bobber rods because I want to know where that line is at all times. I want to be able to see if it's got a bow in it. I want to see if my line is crossing another line. I just want to know where that line is. So I'm using like high vis yellow, high vis green, orange, any bright color. I don't want to use like a color that's going to blend into the water. So that's pretty much my rod, reel, and line setup when it comes to slip bobber and walleyes. Now let's get into the rigging. So slip bobber rigging is actually pretty simple once you understand it. It's a little daunting because there is a few components, but once you get the hang of it, it's really pretty simple. So a rig in total consists of a bobber stop, a sliding bead, a bobber itself, a sliding weight, a swivel, a split shot, or a jig head, and then if you're using a split shot, a plain hook. You can kind of go either route with that. We'll cover that a little more in a minute here. So when we put our line tie on, I really like the basically a rope or a small string type knot stops. They're really reliable. You can adjust them. They don't wear out, and they're a very solid option. As far as a bead goes, I like a little bigger bead with a smaller hole. That's going to make sure that it's actually going to stop the bobber and not slide over my knot. So Phil makes a really good set of these bobber stops and beads, and I'll leave a link in the description. They work really well for me. Now next, we slide on our float. And there's all kinds of different floats, different shapes, different sizes. Typically, I've landed on these kind of more round, semi-weighted floats. They just are easy to use. They don't tangle up much. They're easy to see on the water, and they're compact, and I just like those. So you can use whatever style you like. They all work. Next, we've got our sliding weight. So this is just going to give us a little bit more weight to get that bobber kind of started in the right direction, get it upright. And then we've got our swivel, which is going to change over from our braid to our fluorocarbon leader. And that is also to help prevent line twists. So sometimes when you've got a leech on here and it's all curled up, you're reeling it in, it's going to spin on the way in. So you want that barrel swivel in there taking up that twist. Now, as far as line and leader go, I like about a 2.5 to 3 foot leader most of the time. And I'm usually using 8-pound fluorocarbon. You can go up to 10 in darker water, bigger fish. You can go down to 6 when they're finicky, but somewhere in that range is typically what I'm using. Now, when it comes to the actual terminal end here of your leader, you can do one of two things. You can put a jig head on there, or you can use a split shot and a plain hook. Now, a lot of guys really prefer a 16th or 1/8 ounce jig head on there. And that is good if you're gonna fish a pinpoint spot and you really don't want that bait moving around a whole lot. But in my experience in the clear water that we have up here in northern Wisconsin, especially our clear lakes, I really don't like to have any extra bulk or color on my live bait. And I think it swims around more freely with just like a number 6 or number 4 octopus hook. Looks a little more flowy in the water, and it can kind of drift around with the current, and it isn't quite such a stuck position, fixed position. Now, in some cases, when the walleyes are really not wanting to move and they want to stare at a bait a long time, sometimes just a plain jig head dangling there can keep that bait stationary so they can just come up to it and suck it in. You just have to experiment and see what the walleyes want. Don't get one thing stuck in your head. Try them both. Like this morning, I tried a jig and I tried a plain hook. Plain hook was working better, so I went with that. So just keep both on your boat. Make sure you know how to rig both. And that's pretty much all you need to know when it comes to the actual rod, reel, line, and the rigging. Now, what about bait? What's the best bait when it comes to walleye fishing with slip bobbers? Typically, we're not going to use artificials on slip bobbers for walleyes. There is a few situations which you can, but 99% of the time we're going to be using live bait. So we've got minnows, we've got leeches, and we've got crawlers. Those are the typical ones we're going to be able to get our hands on most places. And if you look at most guys who are fishing with slip bobbers, most of them are using leeches most of the time. Leeches are an awesome bait. They tend to swim in one place really well, and for a long time they're very hardy, and they are just a great overall walleye bait. They're probably the most well-known and best walleye bait of all time. So naturally, a leech is a great choice. We can hook them either on that octopus hook or on a jig head. Either one works. We always want to hook them on the sucker unless it's cold. And I just learned this tip from Jason Mitchell. You can hook them on the side on a plain hook, and they'll actually swim around on that plain hook and they won't get balled up, because they tend to ball up in the cold. That'll keep them from balling up on your hook if you just hook them in the side. So those are kind of your two options. If you hook them on the pointy end or the small end, the mouth, they don't tend to swim very well. They just kind of hang there and squirm around, but they don't really swim like you want them to. Now, another option is minnows. Minnows work great in cold water when fish are looking for a bigger meal. And you can use anything from a fathead minnow that's 1 inch long or 1.5 inches long, all the way up to, sometimes in the fall, I'll slip bobber with a 7, 8 inch, 6, 7, 8 inch sucker minnow on a treble hook. And I can catch a mix of pike, bass, and walleyes on that. So just depends on what you want to do. But any kind of minnow can be used on a slip bobber. And when we're hooking a minnow on a slip bobber, we always want to hook it through the back or under the dorsal fin. The reason is that minnow is going to try and swim away from that hook and swim down. If we hook it in the lips, it's not going to look right. It's going to try and get off that hook. It's going to shake its head back and forth. And when that fish comes to eat it, the head's going to be pointing up. That's not what you want. You want the head pointing down so that fish can come up and grab it and then set the hook. Now, another option that actually works really well but is underutilized by walleye anglers, in my opinion, is night crawlers. Night crawlers are an excellent bait, especially in the summertime. And on a windy day, you get that bobber moving up and down. It can just create a really jiggy undulation in that night crawler that they absolutely can't resist. Now, one thing you got to be aware of when you're using night crawlers, if you've got a lot of panfish around, they are going to decimate your night crawler. So it's really only usable in places where there's not a lot of panfish coming up there and picking on that crawler. But it can be very effective, so definitely keep those in your bag of tricks. So there you have it, guys. That's most of the information that you need when it comes to slip bobber fishing. Now let me give you a bunch of quick tips here that are just going to help you kind of put the whole thing together and kind of skip some of those mistakes and skip the learning curve on some of these things, and kind of make sure you don't do the things that I used to do that were screwing me up when it comes to slip bobbers. All right, guys, tip number one is when you're threading a bobber, especially with braid, it can really be hard to get that line through the bobber. Quick tip, when you get that line as far as you can and it's not poking out the other side, give it a little slack, put your mouth on the opposite end, a little suction, and that braided line will slide right through. You can slide your bobber up, and that is basically how I rig most of my bobbers when I'm fishing with braid, especially when that braid is wet. It just doesn't want to go through, but you just create a little suction and it comes right through. When you're fishing with a slip bobber, always reel up the line first before you set the hook. There's a actual angle that's created when you have that line going horizontally and then going to the bobber and then going vertically. So we got to take that angle out of the line and tighten it up before we can set the hook. Otherwise, all we're doing is moving that bobber and we're just opening up that angle a little bit. We're not actually moving the hook on that hook set. So always reel down on the fish, then set the hook. So here's a quick tip on setting the depth on your slip bobber rig. If I know how long my rod is, this is a 7'6", right? If I pull that hook to the base of my rod, I can go back up to the tip and I can set that stop right at the tip and know that I'm 7'6" down from the surface. And you can add or subtract, you know, a half rod length or quarter rod length and get pretty dang close when it comes to getting that bait in the right position just by knowing how long your rod is. So another tip is to use circle hooks. I've been using circle hooks on slip bobbers quite a lot, and it really cuts down on the gut hooked fish. So like today, I had a couple deep hooked fish. If I had been using circle hooks, I could have easily just hooked those fish in the mouth rather than the guts, because those circle hooks are designed to pull to the corner of the mouth and hook the fish. Now you don't want to do a hook set on a circle hook. You simply reel down and let the fish hook themselves. And one other bonus to using circle hooks is a lot of times you're going to hook pike in the corner of the mouth rather than deep, and you won't get cut off constantly by those pesky pike, especially when you're using minnows on your slip bobbers. Now when you're spot locking or anchoring on a spot, the best way to fish with a slip bobber is downwind. You'll notice that today I've set up upwind of where I want to actually fish, spot lock, and then fish out the back of the boat, use a couple rod holders. Then the wind is always blowing those baits away from the boat and you can control exactly where those rods are. Now another tip that kind of goes along with that is don't be afraid to fish in the wind. The wind actually covers your tracks, so to speak, makes you less visible to the fish, makes that bobber less visible to the fish, and it actually creates movement and motion on your bait as those waves go up and down. So a windy day is actually a great day to fish slip bobbers. Now slip bobbers work really well in the dark and in the evening, but they can be really hard to see in low light. And that's when you want to use a lighted slip float, like this VMC lighted slip float. Now I really like this one because there's no switches to turn on, there's no light to forget. It's just, as soon as this hits the water, these two little prongs turn the float on and it's lighted as long as it's in the water. As soon as you pull it out, it shuts off. And it's got a nice red light to it. You can see it easily. You can watch it go under, and it's a great way to catch fish in the dark or near dark. Now sometimes you're gonna get one of those slip bobber knots that likes to slide around and slide up and down. There's a couple things you can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. Number one, you don't wanna use super slick like 8 carrier braids for slip bobber fishing. Just a standard Power Pro or a standard braided line is gonna be the best because it's gonna hold that knot better. It's not as slippery. The second thing you can do is kind of like I mentioned, get those heavier knots, those heavier bobber stops, thicker line. Those are going to hold a lot better than the really super thin ones. Another tip for using minnows is whenever you're hooking them with a single hook, make sure that the hook parallels the fish's body, doesn't go perpendicular. You're going to get a much better hookup rate when that hook is parallel to the body of the fish and pointing up, because when that fish comes to eat it, that hook's going to be in position. And that's whether you're using a circle hook or an octopus hook, either one, make sure that that hook point is pointing up and it's in the body parallel to the minnow. Here's a great tip for you guys fishing with slip bobbers and single hooks. Put one of these little billy rub nuggets on the hook. Just slide it on the hook, slide it up to the eye, or use it as a stopper to keep your bait from sliding one way or another. And that's going to add scent and a little bit of color to that hook. And all fish are keyed in on fish eggs. They'll all eat them, and that thing just looks like an extra little treat sitting on that hook. So I'll leave a link below for those. Now I definitely recommend a good set of rod holders if you're going to be doing this, because it's nice to have those 2 lines set in the rod holders, and especially in Wisconsin here where we can run 3 lines. it's essential. Even if you're just fishing one, it sure is nice to be able to trade 2 rods out and set them in rod holders. So I've got a couple Trax Tech rod holders that go right in my Trax Tech on this Lund. And I got all my Trax Tech from Marine General. Marine General is an awesome store up in Duluth, Minnesota. And if you're ever in Duluth, you have to stop there. They have everything boats and everything fishing, so much inventory, very cool place to stop. So don't miss it if you're up that way. So there you go, guys. That's pretty much all I have on slip bobbers for this video. Make sure you get out there and try them, get on some of that specific structure or find some fish, pitch those things out there, get your depth set right, and have fun. That's the main thing with slip bobbers. There's just nothing like watching that bobber just start going down and knowing that fish is there and tightening up and setting that hook on them. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave another one for you right here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel before you leave, and we'll see you next time. Get hooked up.